Move on to foreign policy, Mr. President. I want to talk about the war in Ukraine. I want to big picture get a sense of how you see this conflict. Do you see the security of Ukraine as critical to the security of the United States?
Okay, let me talk about it without interruption. Right? Ukraine would have never happened if I were president. If this election weren't rigged, Ukraine would have never happened. You would have hundreds of thousands of people, including lots of soldiers, still living. The cities would be flourishing, or at least up. These are cities that can never be rebuilt again, certainly not the way they were. Magnificent buildings, all ripped down like a demolition site. It would have never happened for two reasons. Number one, and most importantly, Putin has a lot of respect for me. And he wouldn't have played games. And I told him, don't ever go in. And he would never have gone in. This was only after I left that this happened. Likewise, President Xi would never, ever be talking about Taiwan the way he's talking about it right now. And they didn't. They weren't talking about it. It was only after I left. He would have never gone in. Equally as importantly, oil prices would have been at $40 a barrel instead of $110 a barrel. So he wouldn't have been able to afford going in. He actually is the only nation that made money because oil has been driven up so high by stupid people like Biden. Biden is an incompetent man. And what happened is oil. In fact, you're going to hit a new high very soon again. That means Russia. Russia makes money from oil. Russia is going to make a lot of money. And because they're making a lot of money, there's no reason for them to settle other than humanitarian reasons. And let's not assume people are going to be so humanitarian. So Putin would have never gone in because oil was at $40 a barrel, and he wouldn't have been able to afford to have gone in. At $100 a barrel, he made a fortune. And that's one reason. The other reason he wouldn't have gone in is because I said, don't go in. Don't even think about it.
Just to that key question, though, Mr. President, do you think that our security, the United States security, is linked to Ukraine's security?
I think that Europe has to do more. We're in for $200 billion. They're in for $25 billion. And it affects them more than it affects us. It certainly affects them much more than it affects us.
So you do think that it's linked in some way?
I think Europe has taken advantage of a stupid president.
You've probably...
Look, Biden should say to them, you have to equalize. You have to catch up. You know, Europe is about the same size as our economy if you add them all up, add the countries up. It's about the same size. And Biden should say to them, like I did with NATO. You know, NATO, they all owed money. I said, get your money in. And we had over $430 billion put in almost immediately. And the head of NATO, Stoltenberg, Secretary General, nice guy, he said to me, most amazing thing I've ever done. And he said it publicly, too. He said, Bush would come in, make a speech and leave. Obama would come in, make a speech and leave. Trump came in and said, you guys aren't paying your bills. And I got him to pay. You know, they asked me something, which hasn't been reported, but the media knows it. We had a meeting of the 28 countries, at that time, 28 countries. And they said to me, are you saying, sir, because I said you got to pay your bills, are you saying, sir, that you won't protect us against Russia if we don't pay? I said, sorry to tell you, that's what I'm saying. You know what happened?
Yeah.
They started sending us money like, and I was never given credit for it, but you wouldn't even have a NATO if it wasn't for me.
Let me ask you, Mr.
But here's
President,
the thing.
about
the
your
European
strategy.
countries have to start paying their share because we are having to do with Ukraine. Because we're at $200 billion and they're at 20 or 25 billion. It's so unfair.
Let me ask you about your strategy, though, because you have said you want to end this war in 24 hours. You saw the meeting between Kim Jong-un and President Putin. Do you think that complicates your strategy if you were reelected to try to end this war in 24 hours?
It would have been easier if the war didn't start and you'd have hundreds of thousands of people living, most importantly. But it would have been a lot easier if it didn't. But I can get it done, and I can get it done quickly.
How do you do it?
There's another example. You talk about Kim Jong. You talk about Kim Jong-un, right? I got along great with Kim Jong-un after the first month or two when we were sparring, but I got along great with him. We were in no danger. There was President Biden said, and he felt even now, and President Obama told me when we sat down. Obama told me, and Biden still to this day, except I don't think he knows he can't put two sentences together. But President Obama told me our biggest threat is from North Korea. We're going to end up in a war. We didn't end up with a war with North Korea. We were going to make a deal. I would say I would have had a deal made with North Korea shortly after the election had the election not been rigged.
How do you end this war, though? Talking of deals, how do you end this war in 24 hours?
I can't tell you exactly, because if I did, people understand. If I tell you exactly, I lose all my bargaining chips. I mean, you can't really say exactly what you're going to do, but I would say certain things to Putin. I would say certain things to Zelensky, both of whom I get along. Don't forget, Zelensky did something that was very honorable. They asked him, it didn't stop these animals from impeaching me, but, you know, one of those things. They asked him, did Trump do anything wrong? He said, absolutely not. It was a very normal phone call. You can't say that about Biden's call, because Biden, what he did was horrible with the prosecutor. But he said something that was very honorable. He could have grandstanded and said, oh, I felt threatened. He said that President Trump did absolutely nothing wrong on the phone call.
Some people hear you say you're going to end the war in 24 hours, and they worry that means President Putin is going to get to keep the territory he's unlawfully
I'd make a fair
claimed.
deal for everybody. Nope. I'd make
Doesn't mean that? Wouldn't be a win for Putin?
You know, that's something that could have been negotiated, because there were certain parts, Crimea and other parts of the country, that a lot of people expected could happen. You could have made a deal. So they could have made a deal where there's less territory right now than Russia's already taken, to be honest. And you could have made a deal where nobody was killed. They had a deal. They would have had a Ukraine country. Now nobody even knows if Ukraine is going to be totally taken over. I will say this. Something's going on, and it's not good for Ukraine, because the news is no longer reporting about the war, the fake news. They don't report about the war anymore. You don't find much reporting. That means that Ukraine's losing, okay? I see very little reporting from NBC, your network. I see very little reporting from NBC, ABC, from CBS, from anyone about the war. It used to be you'd go and you'd watch, even a couple of months ago, you'd watch all of this great strategy. The spring offensive never happened. Ukraine's spring offensive never happened because they were met with a wall of armaments and bombs.
President Putin's worried people are losing interest. President Zelensky's worried that people are losing interest in this war. As you're saying,
no, I'm just saying, I'm not seeing anything about the war anymore. To me, that means that probably, because the press is fake and very discredited, that would mean that, you know, look, here's my attitude on the war. I just want people to stop being killed. You know, I was asked by that ridiculous CNN group during my town hall, whose side are you on? I said, I'm on the side of people stop being killed. I don't want to see people killed. They're being killed by the thousands and thousands and thousands. And that's the side I'm on. I don't want, and you know what? People like that answer, to be honest. And I stay with that same answer. I want people to stop being killed.
I want to ask you about something President Putin said about you this week. I don't know if you've seen it. This was very recent. President Putin said, quote, "We surely hear that Mr. Trump says he will resolve all burning issues within several days, including the Ukrainian crisis. We cannot help but feel happy about it." What do you make of that? Do you welcome his support?
I like that he said that, because that means what I'm saying is right. I would get him into a room, I'd get Zelensky into a room, then I'd bring them together and I'd have a deal worked out. I would get a deal worked out. It would have been a lot easier before it started. Essentially, for 4 years, I kept them from doing anything. Because you know what? I will tell you this. I've never said this. Ukraine was the apple of his eye. I said, don't ever do it. Don't ever do it. He would have never done it. But again, oil prices. He wouldn't have done it because of me, but oil prices. The prices were so high that he had so much money. So he had all this money to prosecute the war. The one who drove up the prices was Biden.
Given that President Putin has bombed maternity wards, 20,000 kids kidnapped from Ukraine by Russia, mass graves. Do you welcome his support, his all but endorsement?
Look, I had a very good relationship with him, and yet nobody was tougher on Russia than me. I stopped Nord Stream 2. You never heard of Nord Stream 2. That was the pipeline until I got involved. I said Nord Stream 2, people that were sophisticated, military people and political people, never heard of Nord Stream 2. I had it ended. The pipeline was dead. Biden came in and he approved it. There was nobody tougher than me with Russia, and yet I got along with Putin. Let me tell you, I got along with him really well. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. He's got 1,700 nuclear missiles, and so do we. But look, that's a good thing. Getting along is okay, but I got along through strength. And the war would have never happened The war would have never happened. Now what's happened, it's so bad. The oil price is so high. It's hard to get it stopped. The oil price is so high. When he goes above $50 and $60 a barrel, he makes a lot of money on the war. Now, it's a humanitarian thing. It's a lot of different reasons. But I will get that war stopped very, very quickly.
I want to talk about another region that you talked about. Let's talk about another region you talked about, China. If you were to cut a deal between President Putin and President Zelensky, do you run the risk of emboldening China to invade Taiwan?
No, not at all. Because China, he's another one I got along to until we had the China virus come in. Once COVID came in, okay, once it was like, I made a great trade deal with China, one of the greatest deals ever made for the farmers and for the manufacturers. $50 billion a year is a great deal. I don't even talk about it because once COVID came in, it was like, I didn't want to talk about anything. I was a much different person. What happened to this world, not our country, the whole world, what happened with COVID. And it just shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened. What happened, what China did to the world was so bad. But I had a great relationship with President Xi, really great relationship. And he was going to stop fentanyl from coming in. He was going to do a lot of, he was going to criminalize it if you made it. In China, they have a death penalty for drug dealers. He was going to make that with fentanyl dealers, too. But then the election didn't work out, and he never had to do that.
I know you've been asked this, but very quickly, if China were to invade Taiwan, have you made a determination, again, since voters are about to go to the polls, would you send the U.S. military into Taiwan if President Xi were to invade? President Biden says he would.
I won't say. Because if I said, I'm giving away, only stupid people are going to give that answer. I heard the other day, DeSanctimonious said something about he was going to do this or he was going to do that. I say, well, why is he saying the strategy? You can't say that. So when you ask me that question, I would never say that because you give away all your options.
But you don't take it off the table.
I don't take anything off the table, no.
If elected, you say you would order the Defense Department to use special forces to inflict maximum damage on drug cartels.
No. People said I said that.
Okay, what would you do?
I didn't say that.
What would you do?
I wouldn't tell you what I'd do. Why would I say that? Because, again, you don't want people to know your strategy. Now, people said, they leaked and said things that I said this or I said that or I was going to hit them with Patriot missiles, the drug dealers in Mexico. But I will say, and horribly, that they kill 250,000 people in the United States every year. You never hear that number. You hear 100,000. I think it's much more. They destroy families because when you lose a son or a daughter to fentanyl, or a wife or anybody else, but when you lose a son or daughter, your life is destroyed. Their lives are destroyed. They've destroyed so many families. It comes through Mexico. Mm-hmm. Something's got to be done. If we were in war, we would lose 250,000 people. We're losing more people than you lose in just about any war that we've ever had, and we lose them on a yearly basis. Something has to be done, and it has to be done fairly quickly.
Ron DeSantis says he's in this race to finish the border wall. What do you say to that?
Well, I built 500 miles of border wall. It was great. It was just what as you know, the Border Control Board and everybody else, Border Patrol. I had them in my office. We were going to do concrete plank, 40 feet high. They didn't want that. They wanted you see-through. They wanted to be steel, concrete, and rebar. I did everything. I gave them the wall that they wanted. We tested it. We had mountain climbers test the ones that's the wall we built. I built almost 500 miles of wall. We were then going to build another 200 miles of certain areas that all of a sudden people were coming into areas that they couldn't come into anymore. And we were all set to do that. It was all bought. And all Obama had to do, all Biden had to do, it could be Obama too, because a lot of people think he's calling the shots, so who knows. But all Biden had to do is go out and put it up. And he not only didn't put it up, he took it off the site and they put it in yards hundreds of miles away so that Texas and Arizona couldn't get it. I had the safest border in history. I had the best border in history. We had the lowest drug numbers for years and years and years, decades. We had the lowest drug numbers. We had the lowest human trafficking numbers. We had the least number of people coming across. All he had to do is go to the beach like he does all the time. If he went to the beach and didn't do anything, we'd have a great border right now.
Final question, Mr. President. You have met with prime ministers, kings, queens, dictators. You've seen it all. As you think about the possibility of a second term, do you still think that democracy is the most effective form of government?
I do, but it has to be a democracy that's fair. This democracy is, I don't consider us to have much of a democracy right now. They indict their political opponent. Free speech is shot because the press is very dishonest, I have to say. Even the way you fight me on simple questions like, the border and this, you fight me so much. And I'm saying, why are you fighting me? When I first ran, the approval rating of the media was very high, and now it's very low. It may be below Congress, which is pretty hard to believe. People understand what's going on. We need a media that's free and fair, and frankly, if they don't have that, it's very, very hard to straighten out our country.
Did you feel as president you had enough power, though? If you were reelected, would you try to find ways? For example, there's a report you're looking into firing potentially people within the federal government who aren't necessarily perceived to be loyal. Would you need more power? Do you
Well, just so you understand, that's what the Democrats do, okay? They do it in spades.
Would you do that?
They do it at a level that you wouldn't believe. I mean, nobody's ever done. No, I wouldn't do that. I want great people, whether they're Republican or Democrat. I want great people. But I want people that love our country, not people that hate our country.
Anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think it's good. I think we did. We did a lot.
Is there any scenario by which, because Ron DeSantis says if you were elected, he'd have 2 terms and you'd only have 1 more term. Is there any scenario by which you would seek a 3rd term in office?
No. Just so you understand, when DeSantis says that, that means he's not your man. He's not your man anyway because he's a very untalented guy, and he's proven that. He started out, everybody was talking to him. After I worked him over a little bit, he's gone down the tubes. I think he's going to end up being number 3 or 4. He just had a poll today. He was number 4. And by the way, the one that was number 2 was 59 points behind. So, it's very interesting. But when somebody says 8 years, we need 8 years, no. In 6 months to a year, many of the problems, almost all of the problems that you and I have just spoken about will be solved. Anybody that says they need 8 years, you don't want that person.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and good luck.
We went all around the horn today, and I
Yes,
appreciate it very much.
Good luck for many years.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me a little extra time.
Good.